Imagine there was a way you could get an extra 20% off already incredible prices at Kildare Village. Well, there is. Just sign up to Privilege, our rewards program, and you'll be invited to our exclusive private sale, where you can enjoy an additional 20% off at participating Kildare Village brands between 29th of March and April 7th. T's and C's apply. Sign up at kildarevillage.com and find something extraordinary every day.
Welcome into Sportsmemo's betting podcast for March 26th, Tuesday. We got Robbie Veno in here talking some college basketball both tonight and Wednesday, March 27th slate. So a look ahead to tomorrow's card as well. Robbie, welcome into the podcast. How you doing today?
I am doing great today. Drew, how about yourself?
I'm doing good, man. Watching some of these kind of smaller tournaments here. Betting value, I know you know that. You had a downturn there last week, not the best week, but so far in the CIT, you're 5-0. So you're seeing this small conference tournament pretty well, huh, Robbie?
Yeah, sometimes these smaller tournaments are a bit easier to gauge, Drew. They certainly have different dynamics across the NIT, CBI, and CIT home floor advantage. We'll talk about one today where there's actually a conference matchup between Charleston Southern and Hampton. But yeah, there's just certainly different dynamics, different rule sets, right? The NIT has rule changes seemingly every year. So sometimes you see those things a little bit clearer. And of course, I think with the amount of travel and the way that these other three tournaments are sort of geared in a couple of instances to push certain teams into the finals. You know, tournament committees want certain teams to make their championship, and you can see that in the way the other teams are forced to travel and play more games. So those types of situational things certainly more prevalent in the other three tournaments, and sometimes a lot easier to pick out. So CIT's been good for me.
Yeah, good stuff, and hopefully we can find a couple winners on the podcast for the listeners. Guys, we do have a podcast coupon code, POD69. That's POD69 at checkout. We'll give you Rob Veno or myself, Drew Martin, 7-day all-access service for just $69. That's less than $10 a day. It's normally $119, so that's $50 off. 7-day all-access for Robbie Veno or myself, Drew Martin. Pod, POD69, Pod69 at checkout. It's also $2 Tuesday. If you're listening to this later on Tuesday, we have Dr. Chuck's Top Play up on sportsmemo.com, and it's just $2. And when you buy that, you do get a coupon code for Eddie Boron's 5% NBA play tonight for 60% off. So some good stuff there. Good day to check out the website, sportsmemo.com. Robbie, let's start off with tonight's game. The aforementioned game, a Big South Conference game in the CIT, the College Invitational Tournament. Charleston Southern traveling to Hampton, Virginia, to take on Hampton. Hampton's laying 1.5 or 2, depending where you're shopping, as the favorite, the home favorite here. We got 157 the total. How you looking to bet Charleston Southern versus Hampton tonight?
Yeah, as we mentioned earlier, Drew, it's a Big South Conference matchup. These teams, because of the scheduling, only faced each other once this year. It was a Hampton victory quite some time ago, 14th game of the season for the Hampton Pirates. They win by 12 points, 94-82. But I think the more interesting thing about both of these teams is the way they close the season. Hampton, of course, a top-rung MEAC school for years, makes the switch over to the Big South. Didn't go too well for them to begin with, but towards the end of the season, they really turned it on. And through conference tournament season, they're currently 7-3 against the spread last 10. Real good numbers against some good teams in the league. And I think Hampton, for what it's worth, kind of developed as the season went on. I think they could be dangerous here. However, as I say that, I think you have to consider Charleston Southern as well, a team that played even better down the stretch when we're talking about against the spread numbers. Here's a team that's 9-2 over the course of their last 11. And if you want to dig even further, you can go 13-4 last 17 games. So Charleston Southern's been a real money winner for folks. I think that the line here, Drew, was a little bit undervalued. My power rating showed Hampton to be a 4-point favorite. They came out 1.5. We see some movement to 2 this morning and this afternoon. So there's a little bit of Hampton money. Maybe guys using their numbers think that there's some hidden value in Hampton as well. Both teams like to play virtually the same pace. They'll go up and down. Should be a fairly high-scoring game. It's indicated in the total there. It's a real tough one to gauge as far as betting-wise. I think if there was one recommendation I could make, it would simply be the value with the home side, Hampton. There's not much in watching both of these teams play throughout the Big South tournament. There's not much in the way of personnel matchups that you can, find an edge here between these two teams. Hampton, like I say, real good down the end of the season, as was Charlton Southern. Two hot teams. You almost wish they weren't playing each other. You wish they were playing different opponents, and then you could play each one of these two teams.
Robbie, let's move on to tomorrow's card, unless you want to talk any other games tonight.
Well, we got some interesting stuff tonight. Obviously, NIT action going on. I think – I'll say one thing about this Presbyterian-Marshall game, Drew, and it goes back to what I said earlier, how these tournaments kind of force teams into tough travel situations, and they try, these tournaments try to eliminate certain teams. You have to make a determination in this game of what you think might be the lesser of two evils, in my mind. Marshall, for instance, hasn't played a game since the 19th of March. They played their first round and only College Insider Tournament game back then against IUPUI. They scraped by 78-73. They don't cover. But we're here on the 26th, and they've had 6-7 days rest, which generally speaking college teams are not used to. Do you consider the rest to be valuable, or do you consider the rest to be rust at the beginning of a game at home here in tournament-style play? On the other hand, Presbyterian was just asked to play Robert Morris 2 days ago. Prior to that, they had to fly all the way to Seattle to play Seattle. They win that game on the road on the 20th in an upset. They come back. They beat Robert Morris in a second-half comeback, and now 2 days later are asked to play Marshall, an extremely fast-paced team. You kind of wonder about Presbyterian's legs second half of the season. Two outstanding three-point shooting teams. For those who watched the Big South tournament, you saw Presbyterian play very well, too. That's an underrated conference, or at least it was a very competitive conference. So I think there's a lot of conflicting arguments here between these two, but it just goes to show you the dynamics that some of these other tournaments provide. You've got a team playing 3 times in 6 days and another team playing once in 7 days. Which would you rather have?
Yeah, that's an interesting dynamic. I don't know. Which one would you rather have?
I think just, generally speaking, you'd rather have the rested home team, which would be Marshall.
Yeah.
But again, if they come out and a team that's dependent on shooting from distance, John Elmore, obviously, a nationally known three-point shooter. He's put together some huge numbers at Marshall. But if you come out a little bit cold first 10 minutes, it could be tough to get back over the next 30. So we'll see. But I think that, we've seen a little line increase towards Marshall. And I do think, generally speaking, you'd rather have the rested home team here.
Yeah, especially with travel this time of year. The college teams aren't used to traveling long distances. So with the travel, that's also an added dynamic. So I'm with you. I would rather have the rested team as well. And guys, let's move on to Wednesday's card, the look-ahead spots here. Try to get out in front of some of these line moves. And POD69 at checkout will give you Robbie Veno's 7-day all-access service for just $69. That's $50 off. Also, if you're listening to this on Tuesday, it is $2 Tuesday. The top play on sportsmemo.com, discounted to just $2. Wednesday's card here, we got 8 o'clock Eastern tip, Coastal Carolina versus DePaul. It is 163 the total. All these totals are pretty high tomorrow, Robbie. -7 DePaul's laying against the Chanticleers. How would you look to bet this one?
Yeah, this is a good game. A surprising victory last night, to tell you the truth, Drew, in the fashion that they did it. Coastal Carolina over West Virginia in Morgantown. I think anybody who follows college hoops, knows the way West Virginia played with a very, very thin roster down the stretch. Lousy for 3/4 of the season. Then all of a sudden, head coach Bob Huggins found the magic key, turned it, and West Virginia did some damage. Toward the end of the season, they come in last night as a 10-point favorite and get absolutely destroyed by this Coastal Carolina team coached by Cliff Ellis. 109-91. Just like I say, not so surprising, that maybe West Virginia wouldn't cover a double-digit number, but extremely surprising that they would allow 109 to Coastal. Now for Coastal, it's travel on to DePaul. DePaul also wins last night, but DePaul gets to stay home for every single game so far in the CBI, whereas the other side is asked to travel and come up with another big effort. I think if you look, there's a common thread about a lot of these teams that we'll talk about here on the podcast, and that is closing the season strong. DePaul played pretty well down the stretch. You can see the improvement in Dave Lato's team is noticeable for sure. The Big East, as we all know now, was, if we didn't know, a month ago, it was down this year. But DePaul has been extremely competitive all season long, and they've really turned on the ignition as far as going up and down the floor. 94-foot pace is concerned. If I'm the head coach at DePaul, just fundamentally speaking, I think you want to take an opponent that's traveled and playing their second in 3 days and run. I don't think that Coastal Carolina, we know from their Sun Belt play, they're not adverse to running, so maybe DePaul can gain an advantage up and down the floor. Didn't play their best game last night, Drew, where Coastal did, so you have to wonder if, once again, Coastal can scorch the nets the way that they did. 13 of 28 from three, 58% from the floor overall versus the West Virginia 42%. That's plus 16% field goal percentage edge. That's a big number. That's a very, very big number. So an all-out effort by Chanticleers, the Chanticleers last night. DePaul, maybe they took Longwood out of the Big South. Again, we're talking about a Big South team a little bit lightly. Win that game 97-89 up and down the floor. I just think, again, we're talking about teams that are forced to do a little more where the travel is concerned, and the teams that get in the NIT, especially the teams that get to sit at home for every single game and play these teams. This will be DePaul's third straight home game. It's got to be an advantage, whether it's a 7-point advantage or not, yet to be seen. I will say this, as far as power ratings are concerned, my power ratings made DePaul an even bigger favorite. DePaul, according to my numbers, at home, should be a 10-point choice here. We'll see if that line doesn't move a little bit. And
Rob, talking about the NIT, whoever wins this round gets the trip to Madison Square Garden, correct?
The NIT, yes. Did I say it? This is a CBI game, but you're right. The NIT Final Four go to Madison Square Garden for sure, and that's always the carrot at the end of the stick that the coaches will dangle for their players. For the CBI, it's a 3-game series. Of course, best 2 out of 3 for the 2 finalists. But this one here, DePaul, Coastal Carolina, CBI game, only a 16-team field, so you don't play as much, but you do get that nice series at the end.
Yeah, and speaking of that, we got 9 o'clock Eastern. Lipscomb, North Carolina State here, 163.5 the total, or 163 at most shops, so extra half point there at some. We got -3. That's NC State laying at home, Robbie.
Yeah, and NC State, I'll tell you, they're one of a handful of teams as you go through these tournaments, Drew, that is favored in their next game. And I'm encompassing all 4 tournaments that are going on right now, but favorites who haven't covered a game yet inside their respective tournaments. NC State fits that bill. 0-2 against the spread, barely beat Hofstra, win by 6 but don't cover. Harvard gave them all they could handle the other night, 78-77, although I will say this, it's 78-74 with a couple of seconds left, and a Harvard player throws in a one-legged bank shot from about 30 feet away for 3 points to make it a 1-point game. Still, it would not have been even close to an NC State cover, so they're walking in here, getting all the advantages. Obviously, NIT committee wants this team to advance to Madison Square Garden, but they certainly haven't played outstanding ball You wonder now against Lipscomb, an underrated team from the Atlantic Sun, and underrated on a national level, Drew. I don't think they're underrated by those of us the last 2 years who handicap all the extra board games. Lipscomb has been a strong team for a couple of seasons now, and they've been asked to go on the road to Davidson, win and cover, on the road to NC Greensboro, win and cover. Remember now, NC Greensboro had a certain faction of college basketball knowledgeable people kind of banging the table for them to get into the NCAA tournament. So NC Greensboro, not a joke of a team. When you go down there to play them, that's an impressive win, 86-69, win that one big. So 2 road wins for Lipscomb. Now their 3rd road game against NC State. I thought the price tag here was extremely short. I think that odds makers are giving a lot of love to Lipscomb. NC State, in my estimation, at home in this game, should have been a favorite of about 6 points rather than 3.5. But still, you might be tempted to take the Lipscomb side, Drew. They can play on the offensive end from all angles. It's such a well-balanced team. They'll go inside. They'll go outside. They've got shooters that can light it up, Garrison Matthews, and of course, this team returns, 3-4 guys from last year's real good team. So I'm just not sure about NC State right now. Like Kevin Keats, like what he does as a head coach, but this NC State team just is making things far too difficult, and I don't know if they can escape playing the way that they did in the previous 2 games. If they put forth that type of effort against this Lipscomb team, they're liable to get beat. Lipscomb is, beating some giants this year, and certainly they're a tough team to handle. Travel would be a concern, though, and like I say, I would like to get about another point. In my mind, I'd rather be taking 4.5 than 3.5, but certainly I could see an outright victory by Lipscomb in that game.
Yeah, Robbie, good breakdown there. And we got 1 game left on tomorrow's slate. And, guys, the coupon code is POD69 at checkout for Robbie Veno or myself, Drew Martin. 7-day all-access pass. Includes college basketball, every play. MLB starting on Thursday. It's all included. It's for the next 7 days for just $69, less than $10 a day. POD69 at checkout. Colorado versus Texas here, Robbie. 139 the total. Minus 5.5, an old Big 12 game here, Robbie. Now it's Pac-12 versus Big 12. Colorado versus Texas. How you looking to bet it?
Yeah, we'll start with the line, Drew. My power ratings showed -6, so 5.5 is right in line. Seem to be on the same wavelength as the odds makers were when they set the number for this game. Texas again. We'll throw them into the NC State category that we just talked about, a team that's had every advantage, home floor, 3rd time now home floor, but still have yet to cover a game. Getting by the skin of their teeth. They open up a 19-0 lead in their opener against South Dakota State, Mike Dahm and company, and they barely hang on at the end. They win 79-73. In fact, South Dakota State came back, I believe, and took the lead in that game after trailing 19-0 from the outset on the opposition floor. So that doesn't bode too well for Texas. Then they play Xavier, an extremely tough team. Game goes into overtime, 78-76. Texas comes up your winner. But Colorado was hot down the stretch. I remember when you and I were talking conference tournaments on the podcast, and I had mentioned that in the Pac-12, I only felt like there were 2 teams worthy of consideration. Those would have been Colorado and Oregon. Oregon has since gone on to do big things heading to the Sweet 16, but Colorado's been good as well. They win pretty easily last night, 76-60, beat Dayton in a thriller in the opener. Colorado right now 2-0 against the spread in this tourney. If the travel situation isn't that bad to go from Denver to Austin, but it is certainly a one-day deal. Texas got to play Sunday and stay at home. Colorado had to play last night and now travel, so prep time is cut a little bit for Colorado. I think in this game, head coach Tad Boyle will take his chances with the short prep time, with his team just in the flow that they're in right now, playing very, very good basketball. Texas without Jackson Hayes could show up here in this contest. Their big guy, freshman big guy, hurt for this tournament, hasn't played, hasn't affected them yet against their first two opponents. But, to me, it might affect them here against Colorado. So we'll see. I think it's a lot of points. It's not out of line. As I mentioned, my power ratings made it 6, but I think 6 is a lot to give Colorado in what could be a game that comes right down to the buzzer like a lot of these NIT games have. Right now I'm looking at Colorado plus the points in that game.
Yeah, I mean, you say Texas, that they've been all right. I don't think they've, like you said, they haven't covered yet in the tournament. And it also, one thing I noticed with watching Texas, especially in their first game, man, that stadium was empty, and the atmosphere, there wasn't much of it, Robbie. So as far as, do you think the motivation would change now for Texas because they're one win away from heading to Madison Square Garden? Or do you think that, this is just kind of Texas just being able to squeak it out the first two, and now they're playing, a Power 5 conference team that is playing pretty good basketball down the stretch, and you would look to kind of buck that, and Colorado comes in and maybe wins outright?
Yeah, it is a little interesting, Drew, when you look at the attendance for a lot of these lower tier tournament games, and reading a few articles the past couple of days, come to realize that for some universities it's break time. And the basketball team stays behind, obviously, because they're still involved in tournament play, while the student body is off on break somewhere. So that could, I don't know what the situation is at Texas. That's not one of the articles where I read this. But certainly it could have a lot to do with a lack of people in the stands as you get closer to the NIT. And, of course, this is your last step towards Madison Square Garden. Maybe you fill the arena with more local people that become real interested rather than student body if it is break time. But I think at this point, boy, and it is hard to be home and play in front of a quiet gym, but I think at this point in time you have to be motivated as a team to get to Madison Square Garden. A lot of these players dream about being able to play there. Shaka Smart, a head coach for Texas, that can certainly he's had a lot of tournament experience. He can tell the kids what it might be like. I just don't know that Texas, and one more thing real quick here, Drew, personnel wise, Kerwin Roach, the Texas point guard that was suspended for a few games towards the end of the season, we talked about him a little bit. He's now been the designated sixth man on this team. Shaka Smart has chosen to bring him off the bench. Even with the injury to starter Jackson Hayes on the front line, he's decided to bring Roach off the bench to kind of ignite the offense. He's got some pretty good competition on that Colorado side as far as backcourt players go in this game. So I just don't – for me, fundamentally, I think Colorado is worth +6. If we're going to factor in that maybe the crowd isn't going to be as excited as a normal Texas Saturday afternoon crowd would be, that may make the +6 even more valuable.
Robbie, great breakdown as always. We got the pod special here, POD 69 at checkout for Robbie Veno, 7-day all access for just $69. Robbie, we have Auburn versus UNC, and Bruce Pearl recommending the over. Do you agree with him?
Well, it's hard to play Auburn any other way. I've had a lot of success with Auburn down the stretch here. That's one team that I took Bruce Pearl at his word, and I used my own eyes to see that I thought they were turning a bit of a corner. When the coach comes out and tells you, and we know it, I mean, it's not like Bruce Pearl's going out on a limb and telling everybody watching television last night to take the over because he's not going to stop his team from running, and Roy Williams is not going to stop his team from running. We all know that already. You have to have shots made to get up and over 162.5. You need 81 aside, and you're still a half point short, so you need an 82-81 game. With these two, it's always possible. UNC's run up some big scores. I think they scored 78 against a very slow, zone-oriented Washington team. So what can they do against a man-to-man Auburn team that wants to have a track meet with them? I think this number is going to go up, Drew. We've got a couple of days before this game even tips. I think it's the very last Sweet 16 game to go. By the time that one hits, I mean, I know you love to talk about the degenerate special. That will be it for the Sweet 16. And I'd expect that thing. We're looking at 62.5. Now, if you like over, play that thing now, because by the time it tips off, it'll get beat up and probably sit somewhere around 65, maybe even higher.
Yeah, it's a fascinating matchup. I mean, we got the number 1 seed UNC coming from the ACC, which has fared very well. I believe they have the most teams left, and the SEC, which has the second most teams left. Auburn, has won. They haven't lost in March yet. I believe they've won 11 straight games, and 7 of those wins against tournament teams. So definitely playing their best basketball right now. I mean, it's almost a different team from the middle of the year when Wiley was out, and they lost 3 straight in the middle of the SEC play. So it's a fascinating match. Where do you think the side goes?
If there's one huge advantage in this game, Drew, I think it's got to be the glass for North Carolina. Even with Austin Wiley, Auburn's going to have a difficult time rebounding the basketball against North Carolina. Obviously, Carolina is just famous year in and year out for being great on the glass, and that would be a bit of a concern for me. So side-wise, you're talking about a fairly small price when you're getting into a large or higher scoring game. It's almost like college football in that respect. The higher the game goes, the smaller a small number looks. Carolina shoots free throws well if it comes to that, but you can't, and I won't discount everything that you just said about Auburn and everything that I believe about Auburn having turned the corner a while ago. It's hard to sell them short here. They can come out there with multiple guys and drain threes, and we've seen Carolina get themselves into trouble. So it is a real difficult side handicap for sure. I think if you like Carolina, I wouldn't worry about the 5 points. I really wouldn't. I don't think it comes down to that. But if you like the Auburn side, I could never talk anybody off of taking 5 with a team as red hot as they are. North Carolina, for what it's worth, is a far superior three-point shooting team to what they were last year. And I think that's what's gotten this team, which is, in years past, anybody could rattle off 4 starters for North Carolina. They're that publicly known. This year, be a little difficult for folks to go beyond Luke May and Kobe White. So it's a team that's been a little less heralded, but boy, have they gelled the same way Auburn has, and they've got all the tools. So we'll see. I mean, if Auburn's hands get in some lanes and they get some steals and some cheap points, we could be looking at Auburn in the Elite Eight.
That would be fun. War Eagle.
That would be fun.
The Elite Eight for sure. Well, Robbie, thanks for the time and good analysis. As always, check out Robbie Veno's Sportsmemo handicapper page. He's got plays up now. He's got a big play slated to go off tomorrow, so check that out Wednesday morning at sportsmemo.com. He's Robbie Veno. I'm Drew Martin. We'll be back tomorrow talking soccer, and also have Robbie back on Friday. So thanks for tuning in, guys. Best of luck.
Imagine there was a way you could get an extra 20% off already incredible prices at Kildare Village. Well, there is. Just sign up to Privilege, our rewards program, and you'll be invited to our exclusive private sale, where you can enjoy an additional 20% off at participating Kildare Village brands between 29th of March and April 7th. T's and C's apply. Sign up at kildarevillage.com and find something extraordinary every day.
Enable Ireland supports children with disabilities all over Ireland, just like me.
Support children like Kyle by popping your pre-loved clothes, accessories and homeware in a bag and donating it at any TK Maxx. Each bag could raise up to €20 for Enable Ireland. Give up clothes for good at TK Maxx.
And take action for children with disabilities.